Hello, well, welcome back to another series of the Devon and Cornwall Record Society podcast. And for a few episodes, we're going to be going back to talk to previous volume editors about the books they've edited over the last 10 to 15 years. My name is Catherine Ryder. I'm the honorary editor of the Record Society. And here I'm actually dealing with people who wrote their books before my time. So it's nice for me to hear a bit more about them. But first up, we've got Dr. Richard Batten, who's an expert in the history of the First World War and edited a volume for us in 2018 called A Lord Lieutenant in Wartime, The Experiences of the Fourth Earl Fortescue During the First World War. So hello, Richard, and thanks for joining
us. Hello, Catherine. Thank you, and thank you for the invitation.
Well, actually, this series of podcasts was your idea, so it's right that you should be first. But let's kick off. Can you tell us who was Earl Fortescue and what was his role in the First World War?
Sure. So basically, Hugh Fortescue was the eldest son of the third Earl Fortescue. He came from a gentry family. He was born in 1854. The family were landowners in North Devon, and the family home was the country seat of Castle Hill near Filey. He was basically a sportsman, but then he studied law at Cambridge. He went into politics in 1881 and became a Liberal MP for Tiverton and then Tavistock, but he then parted ways with the Liberals in 1886 since he opposed William Gladstone's the Liberal Prime Minister proposals to introduce Home Rule for Ireland. And so he then joined the Liberal Unionists to become the Liberal Unionist MP for Tavistock from 1886 to 1892, when he retired from politics. He was a kind of figure who was representative of a gentry figure who was involved in charitable efforts, trying to be a good landlord for his tenants as well on the estate. And upon the death of his father, Hugh Fortescue became the Fourth Earl Fortescue in 1905, and he inherited not only the estate, but he also inherited his father's peerage in the House of Lords. In 1904, King Edward VII appointed Fortescue with the office of Lord Lieutenant of Devonshire. And so that was a post he held for 24 years until he retired from the Lord Lieutenancy in 1928. He was a very prodigious figure in Devon, as he held a number of civic appointments, including being chairman of Devon County Council, master of the Devon and Somerset Staghounds, and also he was a Justice of the Peace. Because he was a Lord Lieutenant during the First World War, Fortescue was involved in a number of aspects related to the war effort, including charities and voluntary recruitment. As Devon's Lord Lieutenant, it fell to him to promote voluntary recruitment in the county and help secure recruits for Kitchener's New Army and the Territorials. And so he also served as the president of the Devon Parliamentary Recruiting Committee, and he also was a key figure in the Devon Patriotic Fund as a charity to help support Devon servicemen in the army and in the navy, as well as being involved with the Belgian refugees who came into Devon as well.
There's a huge range of different roles, both
Indeed,
a really varied
yes.
career even before the First World War, and then these really important local roles. So very important local figure.
Yes, he is indeed, yes. And the archive he has is immense in terms of what he's been able to keep because of his prodigious involvement with a number of different aspects related to the war effort, as well as pre-war as well.
Oh, wow. So, yeah, lots more scope for research there.
Quite, yes.
And so how did you come to edit this particular aspect of his archive?
So Professor Andrew Thorpe approached me to do an edited volume for the Devon and Cornwall Record Society related to my research. And since my doctoral thesis concerned the role of local elites in Devon during the First World War, the Fourth Earl was a significant figure in mobilisation efforts among civil society as well as Devon more generally. When I was doing my research, a key document that acted as a guide for what Fortescue did, as well as Devon during the war years, was a memoir that Fortescue had wrote of his wartime experiences that he typed up in 1924. As a primary source, it intrigued me because I wanted to know how he constructed it based on what sources he used because of how much he had kept. And I wanted to see what documents he used because there's hints as to how he's been able to construct it, like, for instance, referring to his diaries as well as other private papers in his archive. So I wanted to try and gauge what he had used to help him in that process. And I proposed to Professor Thorpe that the book would explore Fortescue's wartime experiences detailed in the manuscript and include the documents that I think that he'd used to help him with remembering the war years. Hence, the book would include the typescript, Fortescue's diaries from 1914 to 18, and a selection of documents from the Fortescue at Castle Hill archive. Professor Thorpe liked the proposal, and Lady Arran, as the great-granddaughter of the Fourth Earl, very kindly gave me permission for these documents to be featured in this volume. And I'm very grateful to both Professor Thorpe as well as Lady Arran for giving me the opportunity to be able to do that.
Yes, and that's, it's always a consideration, isn't it, when you're dealing with documents that are potentially within copyright, that are in
Indeed.
family archives.
You've
got to make sure that people are happy to have this stuff published.
Indeed, yes.
But yeah, there's an interesting question there about writing a few years after the war. What he's drawing on is whether he's just remembering his experiences, but obviously he's got previous written sources.
Absolutely. And so he admits that when war broke out in August 1914, he's a little over 60. And so at times in the document, he uses key phrases such as I recollect, or as I remember. And so he is relying not only what he can immediately draw back in his memory, but he's also using documents like his diary, for instance, to try and kickstart memories of particular events as well as experiences he had, like for instance with the Belgian refugees, as well as voluntary recruitment, where in 1915 a series of recruitment route marches occurred in Devon. And so I think he referred to his diaries as well as other sources to help him fill in the gaps in his knowledge and in his memory in terms of filling out what exactly happened and what he recalled of that period.
Yeah, well, that makes sense, doesn't it? And so was there anything, reading through these documents, was there anything that particularly surprised you?
Yes, I mean, when going back to revisit Earl Fortescue's diary entries, I was surprised by how he was able to find the time to incorporate his vast interests and obligations since he was still a little over 60. By the time that war was declared in August 1914, he was still able to continue his hunting pursuits with the Devon and Somerset staghounds, overseeing the Castle Hill estate in North Devon, his commitments to activities related to the war effort in the county, as well as regular trips to London to fulfil his duties in the House of Lords and meet with key figures as well. I was surprised by who Fortescue met as well, which included prominent members of both Houses of Parliament, foreign envoys, and other notable contemporary figures. One example of this in his diaries, Catherine, is where he records a meeting of dissatisfied peers, where he lists the peers of the realm who had attended this meeting on the 15th of December 1915, who were not happy with the recently formed Asquith coalition government and how it was directing the war. And he lists who had particular objections and why they had particular objections about it. In many of the diary entries, Fortescue recorded conversations with these figures verbatim, and these conversations provide a glimpse into what these figures and who they were and what inside knowledge they had. In his diary entry for the 18th of April 1918, he had a conversation with the veteran British diplomat Sir Arthur Nicholson, who was the permanent Undersecretary for Foreign Affairs at the time of the July crisis in 1914. And during dinner, both men spoke about the progress of the war, to which Nicholson held strongly that the Kaiser did not want war with us a bit and was rather let in for it by Austria. So you get these kind of insights from the key people who were involved in the diplomatic circles. For instance, he does also talk to the Dutch ambassador as well as the Danish ambassador as well.
Yeah, wow. So it's of interest not only for the history of Devon, but also for the kind of political history behind Britain's responses to the war more generally.
Exactly so. And that's one of the things I really enjoyed with that project, was being able to tread upon similar ground with what I had looked at with Devon, but at the same time, by exploring what Fortescue had done during the war, it gave me more scope in the sense of saying to myself that there is more material and more possibilities that I hadn't explored previously, with, like, for instance, talking about his involvement in the war effort, but also meetings, because he talks about in his diary meeting Lord Derby just before the introduction of what became known as the Derby Scheme in the autumn of 1915.
So yes, Devon isn't a kind of isolated place. It's somewhere that's very much connected to what's happening elsewhere in the UK. And was there anything you found particularly challenging or difficult about this editing project?
I found one key difficulty that struck out to me was basically the stag hunt entries in Fortescue's diaries, because he would go into great lengths in terms of the actual documented the specific routes that the Devon and Somerset staghounds had taken on their hunts across North Devon and Exmoor. It proved slightly tricky to be able to trace the routes because I couldn't find the local landmarks that Fortescue was referring to, or the places he'd mentioned. And I realised I had to broaden the scope of my research so that I could accurately transcribe these specific stag hunting routes, really, as they were recorded in Fortescue's diaries. I got hold of Fred Goss's book, Memoirs of a Stag Harbourer, and John Fortescue, his brother, who was a historian in his own right, record records of stag hunting on Exmoor, which helped to give me more of a familiarity with the routes that the hunts would normally take. And also, at the same time, I was cross-referencing those two books against the online resources of the Ordnance Survey map and the Exmoor historic environment record, because they proved quite invaluable online resources to be able to trace the routes and to be able to get accurately as they proceed, because I wanted to make sure that I could get that accurately transcribed as well as the other historical based information as well.
Yeah, so this is not what you normally expect to do as a historian of the First World War.
Right, yes, I wasn't expecting to have to try and trace the routes across the map, really, of where basically the staghounds had gone, basically.
Yeah, but it's an important part of Fortescue's life, clearly.
Absolutely, yes.
It's in the memoir.
Indeed, and he becomes a key advocate for stag hunting through the whole of basically all through the period after the First World War as well, until basically he dies in 1934.
Right. Well, thank you ever so much, Richard, for giving us a brilliant introduction to the book, to the man, and to kind of what it can tell us as historians. Just to finish up by saying, if you want to get hold of a copy of Lord Lieutenant in Wartime, it's available through the Boydell and Brewer website, as are all the DCRS books. And I should say Richard has also got a more recent book out on Devon in the Second World War, which you can track down. Sorry, First World War, which you can track down if you want to.
Yes.
But thank you ever so much, Richard. And
it's my pleasure.
We'll see you again, hopefully soon.
Great stuff. Thank you very much.